After patiently ignoring the early access period for a game that I can technically play for free on Game Pass, I've spent the last week playing through Campaign Evolved and its bonus missions. This is a game that a lot of content creators on YouTube with passing interest in Halo were very quick to write off as a game so terrible it's akin to having your pet murdered. I was tempted to watch some of these videos, as well as IGN's review where they gave the game a 7 out of 10, essentially saying it's not that great but not terrible either. Just as I avoided handing over £50 to play a game a few days early, I avoided essentially all media surrounding this game, save for the overwhelmingly negative thumbnails. Before I begin my own review, I asked you to consider whether the game is really as bad as these content creators are making it out to be. I am in no way a shill for 343 Industries, and in this video you will hear me refer to Halo Studios as 343 Industries, but we all know they're still the same company, the same way Every is still the same shit company that was Hermes. I have on video been very critical of Halo Infinite and Halo 5, in fact I only consider Infinite to be a slight improvement over Halo 5, but I still consider myself a huge Halo fan and veteran. I love all the Bungie games, even if they could be a little bit cringe at times. I also really enjoyed both Halo Wars games, and I have a special place in my heart for Halo 4. Halo 4 was, and still is to this day, the only Halo game put out by 343 Industries that launched as a complete Halo game, with a campaign, multiplayer, a second PvE game mode, Forge, Theatre and an in-game service record, oh and of course, full co-op and split screen. 343 have never been able to do the same with any of their games since. So what about Campaign Evolved then? Is it really as shit as all these angry nerds are making it out to be? The game itself is actually pretty good, and I do have several positive things to say. Unfortunately though, while 343 have made a heroic effort with this remake, almost legendary you might say, there are some major Avery Johnson issues with this game. I know I definitely have some things to say about Johnson. But with that said, I'm going to start with my gripes with the game. Starting with some of the smaller issues that should be patchable, to some horrific issues that I think could genuinely hurt the series going forward, for both new entries and any future remakes. Going straight into the game's settings, you will see that while sorting out both performance and quality, there is no indicator to suggest how much of my PC's power is being used by the game. Now, I'm not a super technical person when it comes to PC parts, but in a lot of games you can see how much of your GPU and CPU's power has been used, but something simple like this is missing. Virtually every other game has this, and I was surprised that this feature is absent for Microsoft's flagship title this year. Furthermore, in the settings, there is no way to turn off film grain or chromatic aberration. Again, settings that are common for basically any other game. Modders have already figured out how to turn these settings off, but I shouldn't have to download a mod or adjust the INI files to make such a change. If you're playing on console, you literally have no choice in the matter until the devs decide to patch in the options. Moving on to customization, it's disappointing to see that appears to be no skins that can be unlocked by simply playing the game. Now, I was never going to spend money on skins, so in that respect, I'm not missing out on something I wasn't interested in the first place. But one of the most positive changes 343 made to the MCC was the opportunity to complete challenges in a PvE setting such as campaign, and unlock armor, weapons and vehicle skins to use throughout the game. The lack of earning through playing also brings in the question of replay value, something I will touch on more in just a moment. There are some codes going around the internet which you can get for free and input into Halo Waypoint to unlock some armor skins to use, but the majority are locked behind a paywall. The only one I got for free was this Silver Anniversary skin. I mentioned replay value, and while I do think the game has some, it does have less than prior titles. So for example, 343 were really proud to tout their remix mode, which is quite fun, and what it does is activate several skulls which move and change weapon placements and the enemies that you fight. It also stops the Covenant and Flood from fighting, so it can make fights really chaotic, which is actually a lot of fun. But no one's keeping score. There's no score mode or time attack mode in Campaign Evolved, no achievements associated with getting a high score or a part-time. This ties back to the skins because you can't unlock anything in the game for your efforts of completing the game on the hardest settings. There are achievements for Legendary and Lasso, etc, but other than love of the game, there just isn't much reason to keep going back, which is a shame because I feel like my honeymoon period with the game is already over for the most part, and I'm ready to move on to something else. Campaign Evolved also has no PvP mode whatsoever, and the devs have said they won't be adding any more content to the game, which suggests they are already working on the next game, which is rumoured to be a Halo 2 remake, which is something I will talk about later because I'm a bit concerned. Of course, it would have been nice to have PvP, or at the very least custom games, or a second PvE game mode like Firefight, but we have to remember the original game never had online multiplayer, and wasn't until Halo CE released with the MCC. Also, the game is literally just called Campaign Evolved. They're clearly selling us just the campaign and not trying to hide the fact that there is no multiplayer. And so I feel somewhat indifferent to its lack of inclusion. Throughout the campaign, there are no go out of bound areas giving you 10 seconds to return to the battlefield. While I didn't encounter any of these on my first playthrough, I am against their inclusion because I feel like part of the charm of gaming in the 2000s was just breaking out of the map, and in some cases just straight up breaking the game. It's just fun to see what happens when you go somewhere you're not usually supposed to go. It also resulted in a lot of videos on YouTube where we can learn more about the game and how the levels work by breaking out of bounds. All of those negatives I've just discussed I consider to be some of the more minor annoyances, but what has really upset me, and something I noticed straight away, is the very poor quality of the cutscenes. 343 really dropped the ball here, unfortunately. These cutscenes are simply no way near as good as the cutscenes from any other Halo game, including Infinite, which used an annoying one-take cut approach for every single cutscene, which resulted in a lot of shots and pans of characters' faces while they just rant on about some shit. Well, they only went and made it worse for Campaign Evolved. Part of the problem is, while the visuals do look nice, acceptable even, the animations are just painfully stiff. This is best seen when the characters start moving around on screen, and results in a very uncanny feeling that just totally takes me out of the experience. While Halo's story is told through its missions and dialogue, the cutscenes undoubtedly have been really important for telling Halo's story. We all love the work done by Blur Studios for Halo 2 and both Halo Wars, and it's a crying shame how bad Campaign Evolved's Unreal 5 cutscenes simply pale in comparison. Not only do the animations look stiff, but there are some issues with the direction taken as well. In one of the bonus missions, there is a moment where Chief and Johnson have a standoff with the Covenant at a distance of about 15 meters, and it just looks so fucking bad. The Covies are straight up standing in the middle of the room, and when they shoot their plasma, it moves just a bit quicker than an elephant. Compare this to the showdown between Johnson and Arbiter in Halo 2 Anniversary, which is just absolutely based. Not only this, but on my version of the game, the cutscenes had some serious screen tearing, and it looked like I was watching a pirated version of the Polar Express.
Do you know what kind of train this is?
Are you enjoying the video so far? It would really help my serotonin levels if you could leave a like on the video. Cheers! Now, not every cutscene is awful. Some look decent, but the ones that do usually don't have much movement, so they don't seem as janky. I was quite fond of the Jenkins cutscene, as it gave me Aliens vibes, which, by the way, is a really important film when it comes to Halo's original inspiration, and that will be relevant for my next point. What on a giant hula hoop have they done to my boy Johnson? You see, Sergeant Johnson is heavily based on the character Sergeant Apone from Aliens, so much so that they have the same likeness and even have a few of the same dialogues.
Let's go, people, they ain't paying us by the hour. Let's go, hit them out.
The original voice actor James Scully nailed Johnson harder than Johnson nailed Gyllenhaal Signy. If you know, you know.
So if he hears a foe, and he might say,
That's weapons fire. Somebody's shooting. He got cover. Bastards took cover.
The man clearly watched Aliens in preparation for the role and understood the assignment. Johnson's new voice actor just ain't it. He doesn't have the same gravitas as the original voice actor, and it sounds like he's trying to be James Scully rather than trying to be a badass Marine. He also looks like Steve Harvey, and it's just really jarring to see my favourite character in Halo tarnished this way. For example, Johnson's motivational speech for Combat Evolved is still motivating today.
Blow the hell out of those dumb bugs until we don't have anything left to shoot them with. And then we are going to strangle them with their own living guts. Am I right, Marines?
Sir, yes, sir.
But in the remake, it just comes off really tame. It's like Johnson's low on morale himself.
Am I right, Marines?
Sir, yes, sir.
Damn right I am.
I also don't like how this cutscene is filmed. It's no longer taking place in a hangar, so we don't see the UNSC prepping all their vehicles. We see the Marines grabbing their guns, which is cool, but it just doesn't hit the mark. As someone that likes the lore, I won't be too pleased if this is now all considered the canon events of Halo CE. While I have just been fairly critical, I don't think the performance is awful, it's just not as good as the original. In fact, while it's a bit jarring, I did think the actor gave a better performance during the 3 bonus missions. Unfortunately, there was no choice but to recast Johnson, as David Scully has retired. Another small gripe would be the use of these enemy indicators, essentially telling you how many enemies are left to clear out before you can proceed. Most of the time it's fine, but in some sections these indicators appear above camo elites, which just defeats the purpose of making them invisible. Some people will not be happy with sprinting in this game. I feel indifferent, but I will acknowledge it does allow you to sprint past a lot of enemies and rush through whole sections of the game. In fact, I literally had to do this to get the catch skull, which spawns and then despawns on a timer. Now that generally covers the aspects of the game that I found to be negative. So now I want to spend the rest of the video trying to stay on a more positive, or at least a neutral note, because it may seem like I've just painted a really ugly picture of Campaign Evolved, but the game does get a lot right. Starting off, when you load up the game and turn off the annoying voice assistant, you're welcomed with some epic original Halo music by Marty O'Donnell. In fact, these are literally the same pieces of music used in the original game, just with a few little touch-ups. And it's just as glorious now as it was back then, and I'm really happy they didn't tamper with the music too much, because whenever I have loaded up this game, I have just sat there in the main menu just to listen to the music play and just bask in its epicness. Once you load up the game and get past that very jarring intro cutscene, the game starts much like it did in the original, minus testing your shields and looking at green lights for 2 minutes. Now that's an example of one of the more subtle changes they have made to the levels, and it does help with the pacing. It also makes more sense, because why would Chief be sorting out his visor when the ship is literally being boarded? Just like the OG, you go and meet Keyes, you take Cortana and you start shooting aliens. The shooting in this game is really nice, and I felt that every weapon felt good to use. The sound effects are also very good, and the game handles audio mixing well when there are lots of sound effects happening simultaneously. To me, this is most apparent when you and several Marines are firing off your assault rifles at the same time. It helps add to the feeling of being in a serious gun battle. Combat Evolved only had a small arsenal originally, but in Campaign Evolved there are several returning weapons from previous games. You won't see all of these weapons in the main campaign at least, with some like the Spiker, the Battle Rifle, Brute Plasma Rifle, and for the most part the Needle Rifle only appearing in the bonus missions. That leaves you with the Energy Sword, which you can now use, the Fuel Rod, the Beam Rifle, and the SMG as new weapons in the campaign. I only came across one needle rifle playing through the campaign, and that was on the mission Keyes. Like modern Halos, you can now zoom in with every weapon, although maybe it's because I'm an old uncle, or maybe because I still play Recon, but I rarely zoomed in with weapons that previously did not have the zoom function. In fact, if you wish, you can complete this game just fine without zooming in or sprinting. I was surprised to see that no other form of advanced movement was added to the game. There's no clambering, there's no sliding, there's no use of thrusters, there's no annoying ground pound or Spartan charge, which I'm very happy to see gone. Personally, I don't think adding clambering or sliding would have broken the formula, and I actually like those mechanics in Halo. However, I also don't care that much, because I always found Combat Evolved to have satisfying combat with its simple gameplay loop. Thankfully, they have maintained a satisfying gameplay loop, because all of the guns feel powerful, and the Covenant and the Flood both feel like strong opponents. I played through on Heroic, and I did die quite a few times, and I consider myself good at Halo and video games in general. I noticed that some encounters feel even more chaotic than in the original. So, for example, when you make your way to the gravity lift in Truth and Reconciliation, the Covenant send down a shit ton of enemies. Like, they really don't want you getting on board their shit. There are several moments like this in the game where enemies just keep coming and coming. Now, I don't mind, because I love Halo's player versus enemy combat. In fact, that's probably my favourite thing about Halo. And with the absence of firefight, I welcome these big fights. The fights can get so big that sometimes it feels like Doom, and to survive I did start using some Doom tactics like constantly moving to avoid enemy fire. You don't always have to play the game like that, as not every encounter is wave based, but I like how with this version of Halo I was rarely just rushing into a fight, and instead I was thinking how to progress tactically. Almost like Dark Souls, every time I died, I felt like I was getting one step closer to victory each time, eliminating enemies in a certain sequence. A major improvement from Halo Infinite is the vehicles. Do you remember how in Infinite, vehicles were about as durable as paper mache, and how they would do this stupid red flashing and beeping before exploding? There is a reason that's not in basically any other video game, and that's because it's just dumb as fuck. Thankfully, it's gone back to how it should be, with nothing but visible damage and a big explosion when the vehicle gets destroyed. And this would be a great time to actually talk about the visuals, because CE Anniversary in retrospect is a really odd looking game, because while it does look like Halo, it takes parts of Halo and puts them in places where they shouldn't be. Like everything was really bright when it should be dark, virtually making the flashlight pointless and just totally killing the mood and atmosphere that the original game brought. Campaign Evolved handles the lighting much better. For example, look at how when you hold down the trigger on the plasma pistol and the ball of energy lights up the environment around you, acting as a light source. It's the same with fire. As it flickers, you can see how it affects the shadows. Explosions are no longer just a weird splodge like in Infinite, but actually look really pretty, a lot like the ones do in Halo 3. I will never forget how dumb it looked when you blew up a Phantom in Infinite and it basically just vanishes. All of the environments look better than CE Anniversary and Halo Infinite. The Pillar of Autumn, it now looks like the interior of the Sulaco, but also feels like a ship that is under attack. Compare that to Anniversary, where everything just looks clean and pristine, despite all the damage going on. When you land on the ring, it doesn't look like a screensaver from Windows XP, it now looks very photorealistic. Entry from Reconciliation, the outside area, for the first time it actually looks like a desert, which wasn't even something I could say about the original game. During Assault on the Control Room, when you go through a tunnel in the rocks, before it was just a basic and smooth tunnel, whereas now it's the inside of a glacier and it looks very nice. Most of the changes are just visual, but in a few instances they have changed the level design, and the best example of this would be the library. The library was always a bit of a slot mission: ascend several identical floors and try to not get eaten by the flood. However, now the level is completely different and it's actually kind of fun. I really appreciate it how they changed it from going up the library to going down, and the further down you go, the worse the flood infestation again. Again, this reminds me of Aliens, like we're descending into the hive and you can see all their putrid filth claiming the facility. I saw some criticism saying, well, the flood shouldn't spread this quickly. You know, by that logic, we shouldn't even be fighting the flood past the level 343 Guilty Spark. The flood always spreads fast in every Halo game, and that's why they're so dangerous. It's not just fighting them, but witnessing how they corrupt everything they touch. Deep in the Flood Hive, you will encounter your first Flood tank. This is the same enemy from Halo 3, where admittedly back then they were a total pushover, but here, they are the most dangerous enemy in the game, which I find very fitting for an undead huge hunk of walking flesh. On Heroic and above, the tanks can one-shot you in a lot of cases. If you hit them with the sword at the right time, you can parry their attacks to make the fights a bit easier, but they're still really tough regardless. I like how when you damage them, chunks of them are blown off and you can see that you're actually hurting them. It's a bit of a shame they didn't add more Flood pure forms, but I still appreciate 343 making the Flood more fun to fight. A couple of years ago I made a video called Things That Don't Make Sense in Halo, and in that video I talked about how the final section of the game doesn't make any sense. Like, how on earth does a racetrack fit inside the Pillar of Autumn? And how on earth do we explain this weird ass bridge holding huge parts of the ship together? Well, somehow they actually made it make sense, because the Pillar of Autumn is now an actual crash site where the bridge is replaced by a massive tear in the ship. Not only that, but the other sections, instead of just going forward now, loop back around, so while I can't be sure, it does feel like the Warthog run could actually fit inside the Pillar of Autumn and its debris field. Outside of the cutscenes, I don't think there was ever a moment where I thought the game looked bad or boring. Like, genuinely, everything looked phenomenal, and dare I say, this is the best looking Halo game to date. In addition to how nice the environments look, Chief is looking on form. The Mark V armor he's wearing has always been my favourite armor in Halo, and this is the best rendition of it to date in my opinion. Not just the armor, but Chief himself, and it's a vast improvement over his look in CE Anniversary. They even added some blood effects when you shoot an enemy up close or a dead enemy. Blood will splatter on your visor. Not a lot, but I appreciate that we have a bit of gore in Halo again. The Covenant look a lot like their Infinite counterparts, which I don't mind, as I thought that was one of the few things Infinite actually got right. One thing I also appreciate about the Covenant in this game is they speak English. In the original game this was not the case, and that was how we got a lot of iconic lines like The nice thing is they still have a few of those iconic lines, so while the elite speak English now, they will also say what. I didn't hear any pizzols, unfortunately. The enemies you face in Halo, they are such an important part of the game's visual identity, and I'm pleased for 2 games in a row now, 343 were able to get the look of the enemies right. And I hope we never go back to how they looked in Halo 4 or even worse in Halo 5. So another good thing, just like the original CE, the enemies are still fun to fight. As mentioned, the Flood tank is a great addition, but other enemies are also competent in their own right. Flood combat forms on their own are not too threatening, but they are when you are forced to take cover from gunfire and several of them rush you, forcing you to move back into the enemy's fire. Infection forms will grab onto you when your shields are down, and sometimes they will grab onto your face like a face hugger, and the first time that happened, that did make me jump. The elites are a lot like their counterparts in Reach when it comes to how tough they are, and now they will actually duel you when you pull out an energy sword in front of them. Hunters can no longer be killed by one pistol bullet, and while not as strong as a Flood tank, you still have to treat them with respect. Grunts are still fun cannon fodder, but don't underestimate the ones with fuel rods. I'm mixed on the Jackals, as they seem to be a bit harder to disarm with their shield gauntlet. Part of me likes the extra challenge, but I can't tell if this is a feature or a bug. Your Marine allies are quite decent at fighting in numbers. You'll be going up against such huge numbers of enemies, it's rare they will survive each mission. Overall, I really enjoyed playing throughout the campaign, with my only major gripes being the voice actor for Johnson and the animation and direction of the cutscenes. But the game does feature 3 bonus missions set 1 year before the main campaign. It's about Chief and Johnson boarding a Covenant research vessel to steal some nav data or something. I won't spoil this too much, but the missions themselves are not bad. I'd say I enjoyed them more or about the same as the levels in Halo Infinite. The environments you find yourself in at times reminded me of San Helios from Halo 5, which is a good thing because, in my opinion, the 3 missions on San Helios were the best missions in Halo 5. The typical Covenant blues and purples in sections are swapped out for a more ceremonial gold and white. There is also an outside section that I can only describe as very alien, maybe a bit like Pandora from Avatar. And I don't believe we've had an environment like this before in Halo. Throughout these levels, the Covenant also look a bit different, with many wearing more ceremonial armor to fit with the style of the ship. It's not at all egregious like Halo 4 or 5. This is also the only part of the game where you will fight brutes outside of remix mode. The brutes look good. I'd describe them as a mix of Halo 2 and Halo 3 brutes, but they are annoyingly very spongy. They have the same amount of health as the Halo 2 brutes, and they don't seem to take that much headshot damage. I was shooting them with a beam rifle on the head, and it wasn't doing any damage. Fortunately, these levels are packed with needle rifles, which are pound for pound the most powerful and versatile weapon in the game, and I relied on it a lot to deal with the brutes. You can shoot an orange-yellow light on their chest, which will make them go berserk and attack other enemies for you, and if done right, can make for a nice distraction. I do wish they just kept the brutes a bit more like the Infinite counterparts. There only seems to be 1 rank of brute, and it was a bit disappointing to not see any chieftains, as they was by far the most impressive enemy in Halo Infinite. There is also 1 new human character in the form of Lieutenant Williams, and oh boy, the internet definitely had a few things to say about her. When you meet her, she says something along the lines of, "You Spartans are just a PR stunt," and upon hearing that, I facepalmed pretty hard because I just couldn't understand why 343 would just write in a really unlikable character who just chats shit for no other reason than to just annoy the player. She doesn't like Spartans because she's an ODST. And in the lore, ODSTs are very wary of Spartans because Chief killed one in like a boxing ring or something like that. But that part of the lore isn't super strict because in later books set during the Covenant War, the Spartans and ODSTs work with each other side by side. But I'm digressing. But I want to put the brakes on the hate train because literally in the same mission, she does come around and she recognises actually Chief is a pretty hard guy and she respects that and even asks him what they should do next. It was good to see that quick turnaround. I also came to realise that this character is supposed to be Vasquez from Alien.
Hey, Vasquez.
Have you ever been mistaken for a man?
No. Have you?
Oh, Vasquez. He just too bad.
To me, it was just her introduction that was a bit rocky, and I suspect if they had some more bonus missions to put her in, they would have fleshed her out a bit more. Honestly, I don't think her character is that much of a big deal. The bonus missions end with a segment flying at Seraph. It's cool to have a change of pace, but it's really nothing special. I would have liked them to have been a bit more creative. For example, at one point you flee to a debris field to avoid incoming fire, and they could have used this to test the players' flying skills by having them dodge asteroids and other bits and bobs. Once you've completed the game and the bonus missions though, you're not really left with a whole lot to do. I mentioned a lack of a replay value, or at least a reason to replay, and I suppose you could play through again on remix mode, which I'm currently doing, and this does change things up, but I think I do just prefer the standard version of the game. Remix mode does make the game harder in some instances, but there is no real reward for beating the game in this mode. It stops the Covenant and Flood fighting, which was something I always like to see, so I think the next thing I'm going to do with this game is do a legendary co-op run with a friend. There's plenty of skulls to find, but good luck finding them without guide. They are quite hard to get, and they are some tricky to reach places. As for terminals, they cheaped out and didn't produce any videos. You can't even view the terminals in the game, you have to go to the menu to read them, and the lore that they've added I don't really think adds that much to what already exists. So to conclude, I do think Campaign Evolved is a good Halo game. It could have been legendary, but unfortunately 343 just has an issue of putting everything together. They really messed up with the cutscenes, and it does hurt the storytelling, and as a result I am really concerned now what they will do with Halo 2, because there's just no way they can do a better job than Blur. I'm certainly not the only one with this concern, as it's been a point of discussion on Reddit recently, and I can only hope that 343 are listening, but hoping is just coping with 343, let's be honest. But they did nail the gameplay. I can't stress that enough. The gameplay is really, really solid. Halo runs really nicely on the Unreal Engine 5, and I also appreciate how this is the first Unreal 5 game I've played where you don't have to sit there and wait for shaders to be compiled. You can just load up the game and get straight into it. So don't listen to all the haters on YouTube just trying to make some quick money out of a sensational outrage, alright? Play the game yourself, and honestly, just get it on Game Pass if you can, and once you're done with it, just unsubscribe. If I had paid £50 to play this game, I can't honestly say I would like it more or less, because I'll be honest guys, right now I can barely afford to buy any new game. So, if you have enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment what your thoughts are if you've played the game, do consider subscribing, and hopefully it won't be too long until I have another video for you. But until next time Spartans, this is Thunderbuddy signing off.